This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the Journey Step-by-Step Christian Podcast, and I'm your host, Karen Beach. Hey, it's Karen Beach, as the introduction said, and this is the Journey Step-by-Step Christian Podcast. You know what's interesting about how Jesus spoke? He spoke in terms of parables. And when you think of a parable, you think of a story with a message. If you want to go outside the Bible, remember in school when we all learned about Aesop's fables? Well, what was a fable? It was a fable was a story with a message. And that's what Jesus did with parables. And so today we're talking to Andrew Schatkin, who has written a book called The Parables of Jesus, a personal commentary, where he looks at all 41 of Jesus's parables, and he really takes a deep dive into the parables, what Jesus meant, what he was trying to say. And I think that Jesus, and Andy, you can jump in whenever you want to.
No, it's okay.
He spoke about parables because people understood the stories. So
That's right.
just it makes it easy for people to understand the story better than just someone just blurting out facts.
That's right. And lecturing or something, right?
Or lecturing. And throughout history, stories have resonated with people. And Andy, welcome to the journey. How are you?
I'm good. And let me say this, Karen, about the parables. About firm belief, I'm not going to compromise it. Everything that Jesus says has to be read, thought about, and we have to try to understand what this man is saying about things. And he says a lot of things. He says a lot of really important things. And in the parables, these things are tremendously important for our society to be guided correctly. Because everything Jesus says comes from the mind of God. He is God, and he is speaking through the mind of God. Yes, I believe that. I'm sorry.
No, nothing to apologize for. It's when we tell those stories, when we exchange that basic information, is that when we gain the insight. We gain an insight when we think, oh, okay, that's what he meant. That's how that story is. So when you're looking at the parables, what is one that was very confusing to people? What is one that maybe people get wrong?
Well, I gave you what I talked about previously, one that our present society might have problems with. And that is one of them is the parable of I think I like talking about the parable of the lost sheep. Jesus is saying, and this is something that many people may not really be able to get into, including myself. I have to, when I read the parables or anything that Jesus says, I have to think about it and grasp it and try to find out where this man is coming from in saying these things. He says the parable of the lost sheep, that one lost sheep is more important to him than the 99 he had in fold. So he's saying about us, and we, Karen, I have to say, this is my personal belief, that we are sinners, yes. And he wants us to be with him. And he will go after that one lost, by the lost sheep, he means the lost person in life. He's saying he will trouble himself immeasurably to bring that person back. Just that one person.
Mm.
Just that one person. That's the value he puts on you and me and everybody in the world. That one person he wants to rescue.
Because any of us at certain times could be that one person.
Of course, that's the whole point. I mean, look, as I said, Karen, you're a Christian, so you're going to know what I'm talking about. Jesus came to save sinners, which includes me. It does,
Right. Includes all of us,
Right, all of us, right?
whether
But
we admit it or not.
many people can't deal with that. Do you think so?
I know so.
They don't see themselves through the in the mirror.
No, they don't. They don't see who they really are. They see who they want to be.
Do they? Let me ask you this, because I think I've matured to realize that I'm aware of my negatives, my defects that throughout my life. I'm aware of it. I'm not happy about it particularly, but I'm willing to deal with it. Do you think many people cannot deal with their failings?
I think people can deal with their failings. What they can't deal with all the time, I think, is trying to improve on them, trying to do better. You
They
can
can't do that.
accept your failings, but you know, for a lot of people, that's where it ends. This is who I am. But what are you doing to be better?
Do you think this is one of the issues, I think, in our society today. When we look at our failings, we're really looking at our sins. I mean, for want of a better word. Do you think many people don't understand what sin is?
I think it gets confusing about sin because people, I think, a lot of times think of sins as breaking the law.
That's right.
And, you know, if you haven't killed somebody, if you haven't littered, then you are a good person because you haven't broken the law. Whereas Jesus says that we're all sinners because what you think matters, not
He does say
just
that,
what
yeah.
you do, but what you think. So
That's right.
a lot of people don't give credence to their thought life. So they're thinking, I'm a good person because I don't habitually lie. I don't cheat people. And they think I'm good because of these things.
But that is meeting a very minimal standard. They're saying as you say, as long as I don't do anything against the law, I'm all right.
Yeah. I think a lot of people believe that.
Well, but look at something like the Ten Commandments. That God says in those directions, He says that you're not supposed to covet. As you say, that's a mental action. He's saying you're not supposed to be jealous. You're not supposed to be envious. But that's a mental state that is addressing. So I think it's a very significant fact that very early, 3,000 years ago, God said, your mental state matters.
Yeah, I believe that. And people think that. I don't think people give the same weight as to the last commandments about coveting that they do toward thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not.
But God put him right in that list.
God did, but man, I don't think really thinks about coveting in the way that God wants us to. I think that they think that's just what people do. That's what everybody does. But yeah, it matters to God, but I don't know if it matters to a lot of people.
But he made a point of including that in the list.
Yes, he did, because it does matter. If you're a Christian, it definitely matters. Today, as a matter of fact, long story short, somebody really got on my nerves. And I went to kickboxing and anyway, somebody really got on my nerves. And I let that person get on my nerves. And when I got back home, the situation resolved itself.
Oh.
And it was like God almost telling me, see, I told you I got this. You know, you don't have to worry or be upset or be angry at this person, because I got this. And I had to ask for his forgiveness because I was not envious, but I was angry. I was upset. I was impatient and all of those things. And I had to stop and ask for forgiveness because, not even because things worked out, but because I shouldn't have harbored that in my heart to begin with.
Let me talk about coveting for a moment. I think God is concerned. He's included it in the Decalogue. And I think he included it because if you covet, if you are jealous, it breaks down any possibility of relationships. It's a complete breakdown in communication and relationships. If you covet and are envious of someone, whether in their goods, whether in their money, whatever it might be, you are not exercising love to that person.
No, you're not. And it goes even deeper when a lot of us carry that in our hearts, but we appear to not have that.
That's right.
Jealousy or that anger or that feeling towards someone else. We cover up that feeling. And I think on a certain level, we believe our own dishonesty.
People, let me say, Karen, you're very insightful what you're saying, and this is something, I'll put this in front of you. Most people, as I said, they see what they want to see in the mirror, and that's all. And maybe they don't have the self-insight to see anything about themselves as they really are.
I mean, maybe they don't want to, because if we truly saw ourselves as we were, I don't think most of us would be very happy with the person that is looking back at us in the mirror.
But as I said, for example, take the matter in Matthew 23 or 24, Matthew 23, 24, 25, where Jesus talks about the final judgment. He makes it clear that we have a responsibility to clothe the naked, feed the hungry, visit people in prison. He makes puts a number of requirements on there. And he says that if you don't do that, you're in trouble. He does. If you don't clothe the naked, if you don't visit people in prison, if you don't give people who are thirsty a drink and give people who are hungry food, he says you'll be judged. So he sees us as we are. Right.
But most people, like I'm on, social media with my neighbors, and let's say that we have homeless people at a major intersection here with signs that need help and everything else. A lot of people will say, well, I don't help them because they're not really poor, or they don't really need help, because they saw an expose on the news about somebody that panhandled and had a Mercedes. So now they don't believe that anyone that panhandles really needs assistance. And so I think it's important that we help people regardless of what
there's no question
their situation is. But a lot of people will use that excuse to not help people. Oh,
well,
they don't really need the help.
You're right, Karen. But homelessness, people don't understand homelessness, and it can happen to anybody. You could lose your job. You could having lost your job, you could have exhausted your savings. You may not be able to pay the rent, right? And so, and not only that, you may be in the throes of a mental illness, which came from this breakdown in your life. So, I don't think homelessness is something anybody's fault. It's a situation that could, in fact, happen to anybody.
True, but a lot of people don't look at it that way. A lot of people will blame the homeless like they blame anybody for something bad that happens to them. And well, that's the whole pull them up by their bootstraps, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, that's assuming that everybody has bootstraps and that those straps aren't worn down and able to break at the opportunity of lifting them up.
Well, as I said to you, Karen, I used to do, I don't do it so much anymore, employment law. And I know that people lose their jobs all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And after a certain age, say 40, it's very difficult to get one in our system. Isn't it?
Yeah, I'm 51.
So. Well, I mean, so when we reach a certain age in the United States, they don't want you. True. It's true. It is true. So I don't blame a person. First of all, the idea of blaming someone for where they are, what happened to them, is extremely unfair. I think it's unfair. It's very unfair.
It's unfair, but people do it all the time. And it's like, to me, it's a certain amount of hubris because it could happen. The bad thing could happen to any one of us.
Of course.
And, there's a saying that over 50% of Americans are one paycheck away from poverty.
I think this is a very tough system. I know people are not quite aware of it. I think this is a very callous and tough system on people. I think it is.
I would agree, but as Christians, we're supposed to counter that callousness with compassion.
That's right.
And, we have to confront ignorance with understanding. And I wonder if that, well, I'm not wondering if it happens. I'm wondering what we can do to make that happen more.
Well, I believe, this is my firm belief that I know that many people, as you say, takes a position that it's your own fault and too bad, but I think that's completely unrealistic. I think it's naive. I think it's stupid and ignorant. I know anybody can be brought down. Any one of us can be brought down. Correct?
Right.
So, if I can help somebody, I'll do it because, as I say, I mean, first of all, I talk to homeless people. Actually, they're very nice people.
It's so funny you mentioned that because I volunteer to feed the homeless once a month. And normally what happens is they come to the shelter and we pass out food. But this last time, the shelter was closed where we normally go because of coronavirus. And so we drove like 3 neighborhoods or 3 blocks over. And I've been in Charlotte for 12 years and I've never seen this huge tent community that we had.
Really?
And we passed out food and we had care packages for people. And we got to talk to them. And it's interesting because in talking to them, we found out they didn't need food.
Really? They didn't?
No, I mean, as we walked around, we saw like all of this water that people had left for them. And a lot of times if they can't put their hands on the food, just like you and me, they don't want to eat it. Where did this come from?
Right.
So they wanted clothes, they wanted t-shirts, they wanted masks and hand sanitizer so that they can protect themselves from the virus. And you wouldn't have known that if we had not gone there and talked to them. It's one thing to think in your mind, oh, the homeless, this is what they need. But it's another thing totally to talk to the homeless and find out what they need. And another thing I liked about talking to them is we're acknowledging their presence.
Right.
A lot of people don't acknowledge homeless people. It's like if I don't look at them, they'll disappear, they'll go away. No, we're going to make eye contact with you and talk with you and laugh with you and joke with you and find out that you're just like everybody else.
Right.
You don't
It's a funny thing about people talking to other people. I don't know if you knew this phenomenon, because I know people who have had very serious illnesses and cancers and that kind of thing. And when the minute people find out that you're sick, nobody wants to know you. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's what they tell me.
My mother died from complications of diabetes when I was 15, and I was overwhelmed by the amount of people that showed up at the funeral.
Really? That's wonderful.
When compared to the amount of people that showed up when she was in the hospital.
You think people don't want to hear or know about illness or sickness?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's like if they don't see it, if they don't touch it, then it doesn't exist. And to me that's sad, because when my mom was alive, she would have loved to have some of those people come spend an afternoon with her. But they showed up at the funeral after the fact.
They did. Well, it didn't do her much good at that point.
No, not at all.
Well, let me ask you this. What did you think about when I told you the parable of the rich man and Lazarus? I'm sure you know it. You're a Bible reader. So what do you think?
Go over it one more time for people that are listening.
Okay. First of all, Karen, some people don't read the Bible at all. Okay. That's their choice, their decision. But I do, and I think I find it has great value thoughts in it. And in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the story that Jesus tells is that this rich man is there, and there's this poor man who's trying to get a few scraps of food. He's feasting. The rich man is feasting. The poor man is trying to get a few scraps of food. And the rich man doesn't really give him anything, doesn't help him. And so the scenario then is that the poor man is in the bosom of Abraham, meaning he's in some sort of heaven. And the rich man, unfortunately, I know many people, Jesus does mention Hades from time to time. So I guess he meant what he said. He says the rich man is in hell. And the story is that the rich man wants a little bit of water from the poor man, and they can't get it because Jesus says, in your life, you didn't help this man, so you're not getting any help now. So he says the rich man has earned his fate, It's a very important parable because he's saying that we have a responsibility, as you point out, character, we have a responsibility to help other people. And Jesus is saying, in this parable, if we don't fulfill that responsibility, he is saying, I'm not saying that Jesus wants to condemn anybody. He wants to love you. He loves everybody. He wants to help them. He wants to rescue them, bring them to the joy of heaven. But the fact of the matter is that he makes an unequivocal statement here that if you don't do that, this is what could happen to you. You could be in torment, in Hades. He says that's what can happen to you if you don't fulfill this requirement in your life. It's a very important parable. I haven't done enough really in that respect. I'm sure haven't really attended to the needs as I should of other people who needed help. I probably haven't. I'm sure I haven't. And I certainly hope I don't end up like that rich man, which was his fate, to be in torment. But I'm hoping it doesn't happen to me. So that's one parable I think is interesting. And then Jesus gives another parable. I'll think about two of them. One is the parable of the Good Samaritan. As you say, you're probably very familiar with this. A lot of people are. They remember it from Sunday school. when they were a kid. They came from a Christian home, but Jesus says that a person is to be measured. The person who this man is who is injured on the road. The only person that will help him is a social outcast, a Samaritan, a non-Jewish person, who in Jewish culture was outside the pale. Jesus says, but this man helps this injured man. He binds his wounds and takes him to be cured. So Jesus is saying here that salvation is not confined to any group, but is a matter of the person, how they live their lives. It's a very important point. He's not saying going to be belonging to a church or doing religious rituals. He's saying that's not the issue. The issue is how you treat other people.
Even people that don't look like you or that are
that's right. That's right.
Of your group.
That's right. That was his point. He says that Samaritan was outstanding because he was the only person that would help that man, whereas the majority group in Palestine would do nothing. Well, at least the ones that passed by and didn't pass him by didn't do anything. There's another one that's very interesting, the story of the centurion's servant. I think Jesus, he was essentially starting a new religious movement outside of the Jewish community. And the centurion servant, he cures the servant, and there are statements that he extends salvation to everybody, every group, every nation. So nobody is left out. Okay.
The thing I like about the centurion servant is that he didn't even show up there to heal him.
Right. He was outside the house. Right.
You know, and it's to the power of faith. It's like Jesus didn't even have to show up there.
No, he didn't. It's true. But I think Jesus, as I look at these actions and these events, I see Jesus moving to a religion which is universal. He doesn't exclude any group, any nation, whether a Samaritan, whether a centurion. He gives them the same salvation and love that he offers to anybody. You know? So he really started the Christian religion. These actions of Jesus were really the beginning points of Christianity. Christianity is not a racial system. It's not a sexual system. It's none of those things. We welcome everyone of whatever race or nationality or sexuality or whatever. Everybody's welcome. Because I know that Jesus wants everybody to be saved. No?
Yeah. And I think that's important because I think with a lot of churches nowadays, Jesus's real message gets lost.
They don't talk. A lot of churches don't talk about Jesus at all. As a matter of fact, our society some people say that he was just a very nice fellow. He was a very nice guy. And that's as much as they have to say about him. That's what some people say, don't they?
Yeah, but if you're in a Christian church, you should be talking more about Jesus than the average person on the street. And a lot of times people don't get the message that Jesus, wasn't about one group over the next.
No, he wasn't.
He was born a Jew. He was referred to as rabbi, but he did not limit his message to just Jews.
No, that was the tremendous revolution in that he presented in his thinking. Of course, he's God, so obviously what he says is going to be unique. And he presented a new religious system outside of Jewish culture. He was Jewish, but he moved completely out, and that's why they crucified him, because they didn't like it. I mean, it led to his crucifixion, correct?
It did, because he spoke to everyone
And
and he had a message for everyone. And for me, people that say, "Oh, he's just a man," you didn't really read the passages that talk about his crucifixion and his resurrection. Because for us to still be talking about it over 2,000 years later really says something about who he was. And, you know, from a historic standpoint, it's been said that it doesn't make sense, if you're going to make something up, to have women be the first people to find him, to find the
he didn't have a problem. Jesus did not have a problem with women.
No,
First
he
of all,
didn't. But a lot of churches do.
I guess so. But I mean, for example, not only did he not have a problem with women, but he came down and was born and had a mother. I mean, so a problem with women. This man was a fully human person who had a mom, and the persons present at the empty tomb were women. His followers, a number of his followers, were women. So Jesus didn't have a problem with sex. He really didn't.
No, he didn't. And he didn't, like we said, with the Samaritan and the centurion, he didn't have a problem with people that weren't Jewish.
No, he didn't. But that was why I think that was the reason he got crucified. Because the Pharisees were the people apparently that didn't like him so much.
Right.
I mean, for example, they seems to be the group that didn't like him too much. And one of the stories that has always impressed me is the story of breaking the Sabbath laws. The Pharisees were very picky about laws they had to adhere to on the Sabbath. And his disciples were plucking grain on the Sabbath. And they criticized him. But his response was that I'd rather feed someone who's hungry on the Sabbath than keep up some kind of law. Jesus was not a legalist.
Right.
He wasn't. No. And I think the Pharisees, I'm not criticizing Jewish people, the Pharisees, but their thinking depended on legal regulations.
Yeah, and a lot of churches nowadays are very legalistic. And
so?
it's funny some churches are. I know when I first moved here to Charlotte, it's like I went to one church and I had a dress on, and I went to another church. Went to another service at that same church, and I had a scoop neck. Now, I'm never really overexposed or anything, but they didn't like my scoop neck, and
did they think you were naked?
You would have thought they would have, because they told me it was spring to go back to my car and get a jacket. And I said, I don't have a jacket. They let me in, and several of the people, especially men and women, who talked to me before didn't talk to me at all, would not even acknowledge my presence. And I never went back to that church again, because I'm like, what if this was the best thing I had? And I was wearing it to church, and you received me like you did. Do you think I'd be going back to church again?
I think that you can wear anything you want in church. I don't think Jesus requires us to have a particular dress. No.
But I think when we're talking about legalism, some people are, okay, she wore this. This is not acceptable. She can't do this. She can't do that. And I'm like, where does it say that in the Bible? If
That's right.
I'm coming in what I think, that might have been the best thing I had. And if I'm wearing it, what difference does it make? But there are a lot of people who want to make these split hairs about everything in the church. And that turns away, not only does it turn away people, but it turns away Jesus, I think, because you're saying that Jesus is not welcome in your church.
Let me ask you this, Karen, because I've been to several churches from time to time, and I've noticed this. There are churches I've gone to where people don't speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had that happen?
Yeah, I've had that happen. I've also gone to churches because I've lived in like 7 different states. I moved like people were running after me for money, which they may have been, but that's beside the point. You go to churches, and I've had churches ask me, "Am I a Christian?" I say yes.
You're
Have
kidding.
you had evidence of being a Christian by speaking in tongues?
Pentecostal.
Yeah, and I say
Assembly
no,
of
and
God.
I turn over the page thing, and I'm like, and I don't have to. Tongues is one gift of many. No one says everybody had to speak in tongues, but their interpretation is that that is what makes you a
But
Christian.
you
And
were
I'm like,
probably in a Assembly of God church.
but I probably was at one time because I didn't go back. But
Or Pentecostal.
and I'm like, this is not what it says in the Bible.
I don't think it's a requirement. I think apparently some people did it.
Some people
St. Paul
did it.
reports that there were people in the congregation that did that.
Yeah, there were people that in the congregation that did it, but there's nothing that says everyone has to do it.
No. Well,
But
some churches emphasize healings. They make a big emphasis on healings. Have you run into that?
well, I'm originally from Ohio, and I went to Ohio University, not Ohio State, down in southeast Ohio. And so I used to have to go into West Virginia to get my car fixed. And in West Virginia, they're known as having in that area snake handlers.
Yes, they do. They do.
And so they'll get, in the spirit, and then they'll open up boxes of snakes and they'll start ingesting poison because there is a verse in the Bible that says that you will be able to drink poison and not get ill, be bit by a snake. And they take that literally. And my thing is, if you're going to take that literally, why not take helping the poor literally?
Well, I think it's far more important than snake handling to help the poor. I think, first of all, Jesus says, I told you in Matthew 23, he didn't make any bones about it. He said, if you don't do it, you're violating my commandments.
Yeah, and one of my favorite verses, or couple of verses, as at the end of John, when Jesus has been resurrected, and he's talking, I believe, to Mark, and he says, "Do you love me?" And he says, "Well, why, yes." And he says, "Then feed my sheep."
Right.
And he asks them again, "Do you love me?" And he says, "Yes." And he said, "Then feed my sheep." And what he was saying is that if you really love me, you will show that love by helping others. And I think that is so powerful.
Well, he was really saying, I think, and I see you have a tremendous knowledge of the Bible and theology, but he was really saying that when you see another person, you see Christ.
Right.
That's really what he's saying. And in Matthew 23, he says, Lord, we didn't see you. He said, well, I was there when you didn't feed or help clothe that person. He's saying, that's me. He does say that.
And that can be like right now, that's the homeless. That's people in prison. That is people that need assistance in some way. And we as Christians need to be reaching out to them, not waiting for them to come to us and not making excuses for why we're not doing more.
Well, as I said, Kara, as I said, for example, there's certain verses of the Bible, sayings concerning Jesus that to me are very important to me. One of the criticisms the Pharisees made of Jesus They didn't like him too much because he called into question their legalistic system. He said, "Who is this man that eats with publicans and sinners?" They couldn't understand why. I mean, let's put it more boldly what they meant, Kara. Why is this man eating with this societal trash? That's really what they meant, wasn't it?
Yep.
And then they say about him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Meaning, can anything good come out of that backwater? That's what they really say.
Right.
I mean, obviously, that kind of thinking is outrageously incorrect. But they didn't understand. They couldn't understand why he was doing this. They saw him as a lower class guy or something. I think so.
And I think that's why he came from Nazareth, because Nazareth is the last place you would expect a king to come from. But
that's right.
If he would have come from, the royal house in Rome or somewhere else.
Jerusalem or something, right?
Jerusalem. Yeah, but he came from Nazareth. So that to me speaks more about Jesus coming from humble beginnings and being a humble person than being someone that was wrapped in wealth,
Well, really, that's true.
Go on.
Let me ask you this. You know better than me probably that in the world today, particularly in the United States, many people, a judgment is made about them, how they're dressed.
Yes.
Now, or if they're good looking. Correct?
Yes.
So, but Jesus obviously wouldn't go along with that.
No, he wouldn't.
But why do you think a person will, why would they make that judgment because of someone's good looking or they have nice clothes? Why would they make that judgment?
Good looking people, I think, just have it easier in our society, but because they're good looking. I know men get treated better if they're tall. There have been studies that show that taller men get treated better than shorter men.
Really?
Yeah. If you're looking at insignificant things, people think if I look nice, then I'm letting people know that I have means.
But for a woman, looks are almost critical. Our society, unless a woman is good looking, they don't exist.
Yeah,
correct?
That's true. You have to be good looking. Luckily, I am. No,
I'm not saying you weren't.
Just joking.
I didn't say that about you.
I didn't
I'm
mean
just
joking. I
think it's true of men too. Unless men are good looking, they too will be bypassed.
Yeah, that's true. And let's not get into weight, because men and women being overweight, it goes against them. And it doesn't have anything to do with what's in your heart and what's going on, but that's how people will judge you. Oh, she is incapable of controlling her urges. She's, not disciplined. And that doesn't mean anything, but that's how it's looked at, which is why to me, it's important that Jesus talked about all people and looking beyond appearances. But we as a society have a hard time doing that.
Well, do you believe you're a woman, so you could really tell me whether I'm telling the truth or being honest or my perceptions are correct? A woman who is not good looking in American society has a hard time.
In American society, in any society, what changes is what is considered good looking. But people in each society there are some societies in the third world where having a little extra weight is a good thing.
That's right.
And those women
the heavy women have a hard time. The overweight women.
In this country, yes. Yes,
What
they
about
do.
a guy with a big, big belly?
Yeah, he's
He's
going to
not
have
going
a
to do
hard
too
time.
well, is he?
He's going to have a hard time. But I
Unless,
mean, that's just how people are, how people look at them. I mean, it's not like we're being more Christ-like, because if we were being more Christ-like, we would look beyond. We would realize that all of these trappings that we're focused on are temporary and they're not lasting.
do you believe that the reason for the emphasis on looks and clothes in America is like People magazine and Vogue and Cosmopolitan and Esquire? They present images to people. You're supposed to be like this, right?
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, that's not real.
No, it's not real. And if we're talking about beauty, beauty isn't real either, because even the size 0 models that they have modeling clothes are photoshopped.
Oh, I see. They make them up for it.
Yeah, they're not even as perfect as they would seem, but we're all supposed to go after this unrealistic standard of beauty. And, we need to be, if we're Christians, looking inside the person and finding out what makes them, a decent person or not. And it's not what they're wearing or what size they are, it's what they have in their heart and the actions they take.
Well, maybe a woman or man who is not so good looking and is overweight, maybe they'll have a little easier time in a rural area or a small town than in a big city.
Maybe. But we need to think about, as Christians, what really matters, what Jesus was talking about. And it's not any of these material things.
No, it isn't.
These illusions that we think are important.
Well, they have to do with money, because the society wants people to look that way, to spend money on clothes and on beauty and whatever, because it's about money.
True. It's about money and surgery and we can talk on another day about money, because Jesus says neither, I think it's the Bible. It's the Bible or Benjamin Franklin, neither a borrower or lender be. But he talks about not having to rely on borrowing from people, and we have a whole society based on borrowing.
We do. Yes, that's true. So I now have another interview at 6, which is a few minutes. I really enjoyed talking to you. I found it very interesting and insightful. Do you have any last words of advice as to how we can be transformed and transform our society with the love of Christ?
Well, I'm the interviewer, so let me ask you.
You can ask me.
As we wrap things up, what words do you have for Christians in 2020?
My words are that Christianity and my faith is about Jesus, and about Jesus as a person. It's not about a church. It's not about anything else but the reality of the person of Christ. And so that person has the capability, because I believe he has eternal life in heaven. He has the capability in a relationship with people of transforming people into the potential that they may be able to gain. He has the potential to remake me and you and everybody into his eternal image.
All right.
He can make us something we're not.
Exactly. And that's what the goal is. So
it is the goal.
Andy Schatkin for dropping by the journey. And I will definitely have you back. It seems like we've got a lot more to talk about. Until next time, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.